So hello everybody, thank you for joining us today for the virtual visit at Danielle Alhassid's studio in New York. I would like to first give you the context for this meeting and welcome you to the Liebling House located in the heart of Tel Aviv, which is housing this event. The Liebling House is a cultural center dealing with architecture, conservation, and urbanism. Modern architecture and the White City is our starting point for discussion on life in the city in the past, present, and future. We are a German-Israeli cooperation between the German Federal Ministry of Interior, Building and Community and the Tel Aviv municipality. Let me introduce myself shortly. My name is Sabrina Zegla. I'm an architect, curator, and part of the founding team of the Liebling House since 2015. I have curated several projects at the Liebling House, including the permanent exhibition, telling the story of the White City as a starting point for discussion. Today, I curate the residency program and the project room. The Precious Stones, the current exhibition at the project room, is by Danielle Alhassid, which I will introduce shortly. And before we start our visit, I would like to say a few words about the White City for those of you who don't know it. And introduce the concept of the project room, hosting the exhibition, as well as the exhibition itself for people from abroad who, or who won't get a chance to see it, or for people who haven't visited yet. I would just, let's start with that. And so the White City is an idea, concept, a brand, and part of Tel Aviv's built environment. An urban area rich with international style buildings developed during the 1930s and 40s. The White City quickly became the heart of the growing Tel Aviv. After decades of disrepair and transformations, both the public and the municipality discovered its qualities and values. This time as a heritage worth preserving, leading to UNESCO's declaration of the World Heritage Site in 2003. The White City includes an unprecedented number of more than 4,000 historic international style buildings while sustaining a vibrant urban life. In recent years, there is an ongoing discussion about architectural heritage and how can we integrate conservation into diverse mediation activities that relate to the White City as a living cultural and historical fabric, which tells the stories of all the communities sharing this space. This leads me to the project room. The Liebling House project room is a space in which artists from various disciplines are invited to actively participate in a critical reflection on the question, what is the White City? As part of an alternative, collaborative, and ongoing investigation of the White City as a platform for discourse regarding conservation, urbanism, identity, and culture in Tel Aviv. The project room is the open end of the permanent exhibition at the Liebling House, which tells the story of the White City as the point of discussion for story in the making. Thus, the project room is an opportunity to turn the question to the public, to present new and different points of view and narratives as alternative it serves as an alternative timeline, so to speak. The works shown in the project room are collected through an open call procedure, giving an opportunity to whoever wishes to take part. And now we are the guests at the Danielle studio. I will introduce Danielle shortly and then a bit the exhibition. Danielle Alhassid is an Israeli multidisciplinary artist living in New York. She is a graduate of Rietveld Academy in 2020, Amsterdam. She is currently completing her studies for an MFA at Hunter College, New York. Her work involves stop motion animation, video, printmaking, and performance, and focuses on the intersection between memory, identity, immigration, and urban life. And now I will show you a few photos of the installation. Just a second, I will share my screen for you to see. Sorry. So here you see the first image of the exhibition. So the exhibition, the precious stones is the exhibition that Danielle Alhassid is showing. It's the fourth exhibition in the project room. And in this exhibition, Danielle addresses the question, what is the White City? With this installation she calls the precious stone. It's a series of stop motion animation films that interrogate the urban experience. Interrogate the urban experience and memory. The film addresses the history and myth attached to Alhassid's hometown, Tel Aviv, also known as the White City. They cast a critical gaze on the city's official historical narrative and seek to expose traces of hidden histories. All the while, Alhassid presents her version of the White City. Her city lies in the cracks between the myth and personal memories, between universal metaphor and concrete reality. Through these gaps, she calls on forgotten figures and marginalized stories to re-enter into historical urban space. So at this point, I will show you some more images of this installation in the project room, so you can see, get a feel of the space. And I will ask Danielle to join us now.
All right.
I will stop the share, and at this point, I will ask Danielle also to share her screen. And I will just say a few words about this evening. So we decided to invite you, our guests, to a studio visit at Danielle's and actually discuss the exhibition through the stop motion technique that Danielle uses on the installation and the videos she's showing in the exhibition. So I think let's start, Danielle, and maybe you can tell us how you started working with animation.
All right, so hello everybody, really great to be here. I saw some familiar names within the crowd. So first of all, I wanted to thank Sabrina and the Liebling House for hosting me in my studio, or vice versa. And also really grateful to see that among our participants, I see faces from Amsterdam and New York and Tel Aviv and many other places. So thank you all for coming. And also, I just wanted to share that because I think this is a special opportunity for me to share such an intimate way. So we are all kind of coming from so many different places. And that brings me back to Sabrina's question. So yeah, stop motion animation and my work with stop motion animation started for me in New York. I was studying at the Netherlands at that time, and I got a scholarship and opportunity to come here, and that's where I started to do stop motion. But while animating, I also discovered another thing, and I think what was really meaningful for me is that I discovered the ability to tell stories. For many years, my side job, that's like everybody around me know that, my side job was being a tour guide, and storytelling was a very important thing for me. And once I realized that I could extract the time element from my visual work, my drawing, let's say, or my installation, and I could introduce the idea of the experience of walking in a city or telling those stories and kind of combine these two elements together. That was a very special moment for me. And that actually started in New York, and I took it back with me to Amsterdam, but we'll get to that. So maybe instead of like telling my whole biography, I think the best way to actually share the reason that we gathered here today would show you some of the things that I do. And just to explain a little bit how this 1 hour would work, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you. So we are now in my studio, and here just around me, There is the camera and the light box that I work with, and I would speak about in a moment. And the technique that I work with, as I said before, is stop motion, where actually I work frame by frame, 24 images in a second. So quite an intense process, and it's also a good time for me, good moment for thinking and how all of that works. I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to share my screen, and my thought was that I'll show you my way of working, and then I'll also share some bits from the different films that are presented in the exhibition. So I'm turning on the camera. Let's see. Okay. All right. Just because Zoom is a bit like an aquarium, like I know you're all here, but I don't hear anybody. So could you, Sabrina, let me know if you see?
Yeah, I see, but
you see
I just
everything.
want to tell you, it's a bit unsharp again. So
is it focused now?
Yeah, now it's good.
Okay, so the reason that it was unsharp is because it wasn't on focus yet. So we are starting to, so that's the good trick. And we are starting with that. So I actually left the last frame of one of the films. The different films in the installation that Sabrina shared are related, as it was said, to the city. And I was working with different images of Tel Aviv when I was staying there for a longer while. And actually I worked in quite a chronological way, in a way. The film I'm going to show now is also, that I'm speaking about now and I'm going to share, deals with contemporary, the present of Tel Aviv. But I was using the stop motion animation, and I tried to introduce other characters from other times to this city. So actually the main character in this animation is this figure, and is the grandfather of my grandmother. And the story of Tel Aviv, and I guess we would like slowly reach that, but the story of Tel Aviv meets me from different perspectives. So I was speaking about the tour guide part and my interest in mapping, but speaking about Tel Aviv for me was also speaking about identity, and in relation to the white city, speaking about a narrative of a city. And as a tour guide that worked in several cities, what I learned is that each city has this kind of story that it tells about itself. But what I found most interesting is actually to find the cracks in these narratives, or the other stories that are not part of this bigger narrative. So going back to, I kind of piled up all these layers. And by the way, this technique that I'm showing now, it's what is often called cutout animation. So I worked with different materials, and one of the main materials is paper. So you could also try it at home, or don't. I work with these pieces of paper, and I move them slowly. And each movement is actually one photo that is all combined together. We will see it soon. And that's how the film is, that's how the movement is created. So going back to Tel Aviv, so going back to Tel Aviv, I was staying in the city for a longer while, and I started noticing how the city changed. And I was thinking about the connection between the changing city and the history of my own family, that they were actually Ottoman Jews that came to Tel Aviv, still actually at the time of the Ottoman Empire. And I was wondering, how would these Ottoman Jews relate to the narrative that is now so common, the story of the Bauhaus and the kind of a modernist city that came out of the stand with very much Eurocentric focus. And what I tried to do after reading a lot about it and researching about it, that's actually how I always work. after reading a lot and making an extended research, I kind of like put all the things I learned aside, and I start to work with my hands, and I let my hands lead me. And then I go back to this footage and I try to understand what did the images that I created tell? What kind of story do they tell? So here I showed a little piece that we will now see in movement. And what I often do is that I slowly, since we're talking about mapping and we're talking about layering of the city, what I often do is that I slowly cover one layer, just like actually how a city is built. So I'm kind of like rebuilding or reconstructing the layers of the map or the layers of history. And often, since I have the freedom to do so as an artist, I choose a certain character or a certain moment in time, and I bring them with the animation, I bring them back to life. So that's how, for example, my great grandmother could suddenly visit Tel Aviv in 2022 and have the tea that she had at the balcony, or this figure that I found that floats around the image. So that's kind of gives an idea of how I work. And I think now, after we've seen that, it might be interesting. I'm going to stop share. It might be interesting to see a little taste from the animation itself. So I'm going to open Eliyahu, this film, and share it with you. Sabrina, is there anything you want to add that I think that I forgot? Or
I'll just add that Eliyahu is actually the exhibition has three different works, and this is the one you created especially for the exhibition. The other two were already existing before. Maybe later we can address that again.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and here it is. So I'm not going to share the whole thing. I do want to also give credit to all the amazing musicians that work with me, and I often collaborate when I do my work. So I do the visual and lead the concert, but I work with other musicians, and that's also, or other voices, not necessarily musicians. And that's also a moment for me to use my work as a platform to allow more people to take part and also be heard and be seen. And here I worked with Ido, my brother, and Basil, and they were together creating the soundscape that we are about to hear. So since I showed this frame, I'm gonna jump in between, but I wanted to show the little part that we've seen. So let's have a look. All right, so that was, I hope you recognize some of the elements I shared before, but as you could see, and that's what I When I studied animation, I was amazed actually by, first of all, the very simple magic, how you could just, by moving few pieces of paper, you could really bring back to life the materials. So when I bumped into few photos of my family back then in the 19th century in Tel Aviv, the animation was after a while that I was already working, and I kind of knew that the animation would be the tool for me to bring them back to life and try to make this encounter between the two worlds, the present world of Tel Aviv and the other voices or the other history that used to exist there and now is not that present. And sorry about that. And maybe just before jumping back to my light table, I wanted also to show this part. I have a great interest in mapping and how maps are actually kind of a visual symbol of the different layers, but they also show who controls the space and how the space is being organized, and more than that, how our movement within this space is being organized. And I will show a few different ways in how I work with maps. And that's one of the examples I wanted to share. Here we see this character of Eliyahu, and I'll just share a few seconds here. Okay, so we are going to say goodbye to this work for now. And I'm gonna I'm gonna stop share again. Okay, here I am, back to the studio from Tel Aviv. So in the two little pieces that I've shown, you could see the way I was working with paper and also how the animation allows to jump in between different time zones. And the one I showed now with the map kind of growing on the person's face was quite a direct way for me to try and think about the traces, maybe that each person lives in a city. And then you could see the transition from this face to an older house and how a newer city grows out of it. So I am happy to start with this work because in a way that's the most recent work and maybe the most close to my heart since there are family members that are depicted there, but we would meet a few more of my family members soon. And speaking about mapping, I want to go back with you to the light table. Let's do that. And speak a little bit about the maps.
Danielle, can I just have a short...
yeah, sure, please, go ahead.
Because you were speaking about jumping through time and kind of creating this bridge between the past and the present. And actually, if it's okay, can you maybe show also the start of this this last film, Eliyahu, because then you really have his image kind of emerging and kind of also you have also this idea about this history, this angel of history that you are kind of referring to.
Yeah, so do you see my screen now? Do you see the, okay, perfect. So actually I love it when you talk and I'm kind of like animating what you're saying. We should do that more often. But yeah, so these are the pictures that I bumped into and that were really special for me. And they both appear in the animation where this character, Estelle, she's becoming a building in the city. So maybe you saw her or maybe you recognize her where she kind of breaks and falls apart and eventually she becomes this piece that we we started with. She becomes this structure. And that's the other one, Eliyahu. That's the photo, one of the images we've seen. That's actually the photo I used for the opening and the closing part of the animation. Let me have a look. I got so many papers, but that's another photo I bumped into. And actually, eventually, just to give some kind of understanding of how these things go, then I worked with the other photos that I had and with contemporary photos I took myself of the changing city, of the skyscrapers and what the economical changes are doing to the city. And I was trying to introduce this kind of ghost to the city. And from this image, this was actually the first image I created. And from this image, I started to kind of like, in a way, tear it apart, and I slowly built this whole short film. So that's yeah. These are. So
it's actually a collage. You started with this collage, which actually created the whole film.
Exactly, and also became the yeah. That's actually the poster from the exhibition, which is, by the way, open until 30th of April. If you're around in Tel Aviv, you're very welcome to join and visit it. But back to the animation. So what I find really fascinating in animation is that the material that I work with, or like the stop motion, actually, it also tells some stories. So, for example, when I worked with this wrapping paper, as the one you see here, I thought about new places or this idea of unwrapping. But when I wanted to go back to the history of the city, I went back to different maps of Tel Aviv. Maps that show us different kind of histories and yeah, the changing structure of the city, I would say. And one of the animators that I admire the most is Jan Svenkmayer. And Jan Svenkmayer, what he often does in his animations, that he combines objects together with paper cuts or together with, for example, as you could see here, with clay that he moves around. And these are all techniques that I also use in my films. So slowly, for example, this eye would close and then open up and look at us. And that's how it works. So each movement like that is actually a photo. And then all these photos are connected together and the magic happens, or the movement begins, depends how you want to call that. So that's essentially how these things work. And going back to the maps or to the objects, one of the objects that was really important for me, and it also appeared in the name of the exhibition, are the stones. And the stones in my works became a symbol for memory, this kind of object that carries all the layers of the history. The stone for me was this object that kind of like knows the ultimate truth of the city, that really is part of the core of the city, but never reveals the full history. I mean, even if you ask the stone, what does it know? It would never tell you. So thinking about these things, I started to work with different maps and combining them with the stones that I collected. And then I was living actually in Amsterdam, and I had a stone collection that I didn't know why was I doing that, but every time I came visiting, I took with me one stone. So let's focus a little bit. Okay. So every time I came visiting, I took with me one stone, and then the collection grew bigger and bigger. And when I bumped actually in this book, which is called White City, Black City by an architect called Sharon Rothbard, when I bumped into this book and I started reading it, I also started to think again about my stones collection and what do they represent. And I want to share with you a few maps from this book. So this book, as it sounds, also refers to our theme, apparently, the white city. But as you could see, what we'll try to kind of break this narrative or question, what is a white city, or if actually there is a white city. And one of the things that were really fascinating for me is to reread the history of the city where I grew up. And in one of the films that I'm going to share soon, I tried to depict this experience. Let me jump. So here are some of the maps. For example, I actually used in my animation. So these are all archival materials that shows Tel Aviv before 48, so before the war of 48, before Israel was established. And what I learned from this book is actually the existence of all the Palestinian villages within the area of Tel Aviv. So through maps, I actually understood in a different way a city through older maps. I understood in a different way a city that I thought that I knew by heart, but suddenly the city's narrative and my also feeling or understanding of the city changed. And that's what I try to emphasize in the animation that I'm going to share with you now. So I'm going to jump with you to another animation work where you could see the stones again.
Are you talking about Born from Seeing Cloud?
I am talking now actually about What's Gone is Gone. I think I'll start with that. Do you see it and hear it? Is it all working?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to stop for a moment and say, so you could see that under this stone, this symbol of memory, the maps started to appear, the maps that are telling the history of, well, as I saw it, another possibility or another reality that had existed. And you could see the different, in those maps, you could see the different Palestinian villages and Tel Aviv. Actually, they're all at the same area. We'll get back to that soon. But what I wanted to share here is actually the idea of the paper, working with paper and the layering of the paper, and showing how the paper and the grid especially tries to take over. When we speak about the white city, Tel Aviv is known to be the white city since it is the modernist Bauhaus architecture. So this kind of grid minimalist design of the city that actually was used to erase other histories. And here in this work, it was the first time that I was trying, I had this really strong urge to take this whole book that I read, I don't know, maybe like a few hundred, I would say like around 400 pages, and try to kind of make something out of it and try to approach the story in a different way. So these are the stones and the grid. I'm just going to show a little bit more and we'll move to the next thing. All right. So that's, I'm kind of trying to take you as a as a tour guide. I'm trying to take you to my tour and my way of thinking. And definitely, as a Tel Avivian, or as a person who grew up in Tel Aviv with Tel Avivian parents, a Tel Avivian grandmother, and the grandmother of the grandmother. So we were. I felt very much part of the city, and when I came across, and I also think that there is this notion of Tel Aviv of being this European bubble, the city that contains other possibilities within the Israeli reality. So when I bumped into this book, something changed in me, and then I started actually to obsess about Tel Aviv and try, as you saw in my works, to really break the city's narrative into little pieces. And I think that one of my inspiration was actually that then I was working as a tour guide in Amsterdam, and I started to see the cracks in the narrative, also the very clear narrative and the story that Amsterdam tells about itself. And I started to recognize a certain line that exists within actually all the cities, and that's what I was doing here. But that wasn't enough. I made this work and I felt like something is still missing. And what I believe was missing is perhaps the personal or the relation to my own history. And I thought about a conversation that I had with my grandmother. My grandmother keeps an album with all our family in it, but some of the figures in this album are missing. And I was very fascinated about this missing.
Are cut out. They're not missing, they were cut out.
They're cut. Sorry, thank you. They were, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. They were cut out, and I was wondering who are. I was wondering what's the story of those characters, and quite spontaneously, I had a dialogue with her, and I wanna share a little piece from that, and then connect it to what we've seen before. So. Let me, okay. All right. So what we are about to see here is a short conversation that I had with my grandmother about our family album. And this piece actually comes together with the stone piece that we've just seen, What's Gone is Gone. They are, I see them as this kind of video diptych, and they are two different voices that are assembled together. And also in the exhibition in Liebling House, you could see, if you would visit, that each video is some kind of a different voice. It tries to tell the story of the city, and these voices are somehow contradict each other, or they overlap, but together they create this kind of they create the soundscape of the city that is actually full of these different histories and different stories. So let's
By
see
the way,
that.
Danielle, we hear very loud that your cityscape, New York.
Yeah, you hear the horns. Okay, I can mute.
But now we can't hear you.
ואני גם הייתי מצולמת. אבל כשראיתי את עצמי בתוך התמונה, אמרתי, אני מוכרחה להוציא אותי מכאן, כי אני מכערת את כל היופי שבתמונה הזאת. כאן הזמינו אותי גם להצטרף, וכשראיתי את התמונה אמרתי, לא, אני לא רוצה להנציח את עצמי כל כך מכוערת. חתכתי במספריים, גזרתי לפיסות קטנות שאף אחד לא יזהה, ולפח. כאן חשבתי לעצמי, שני גברים כל כך נחמדים, בשביל מה הם צריכים שמכשפה תעמוד על ידם? גל זר, הנה נשלחתי.
Okay, I'm gonna jump to the punchline. Sorry for the spoiler. אבל יש תמונות שלך שכן שמרת.
רק שאני יפה בהם.
We can't hear you, Danielle.
It's okay. I'm used to speaking to myself. I do that often. So I was saying that was an abbreviated version, but thinking about paper cuts, actually thinking, I'm going back to speak a bit about the material. So thinking about paper cuts and what this idea of the papers, they could, like pieces of paper can construct a city or a character. The different maps could lay over one another, cover one another, hide one another. The grid could try and create some kind of order within it. And then when I try to think about how all these urban ideas, my fascination with architecture, this kind of stories, how they are related to me, I went back to my own family cutouts, my own family album with its cutouts, and I combined this work as part of the voices of the city, because I think that my grandmother, very honestly, like she does, a very great storyteller, I must say, and a great inspiration for me. It's always told me also many stories about her childhood in Tel Aviv, explains how she also uses actually the word commemoration. So she explains what kind of things she wants to keep in the family album and what kind of things she wants to get rid of. And in this moment, I kind of felt how my family album is connected actually with history book and in the way that cities are designed, and all the things are actually were connected together. And I would like to go back to the light table and show another last technique, which I often work with, and that's ink with glycerin. And I work with this idea of the erasure or the different layers that kind of, with a lot of water, and you could see how the different layers are kind of being washed away, like memories, like stories, and how the materiality actually carries some kind of conceptual idea within it. And before doing that, I'll share a last video that we would see now. And that's Born from Sea and Cloud, Miketzev Gal, for the people that speak Hebrew. And here it is. So this is a different technique you would see. Still, we are in the same story, the narrative of the White City, my personal kind of encounter with it, and my attempt to try and kind of open up this narrative, tear it to pieces, reconstruct it, and represent other voices that, are actually coexist within it, but are not often being heard or seen. And I'm going to jump to this part again with the stone.
A city is built just like history, always by the winners, for the winners, and finally, according to the winner's narrative. Just like history, the city is not welcoming to everyone. It doesn't provide everyone's desires in an equal manner. I was born in a city that came out of a dream, a city of opportunities. The people that came from far away and went back to their roots. the triangle, the square, the cone, the circle that rise out of the sand. When I was a child, I felt so lucky to be born in that island. An island that was made of a dream. The joy of freshness, of its little roads, beautiful architecture and squares.
Danielle?
I'm jumping back in. So that was a little taste of a different technique, and we came to speak about stop motion. So I wanted to share with you also. Let's do that. I want to share my screen again and show you a bit how I work with the glycerin, and speak also a bit about the little piece of work that we have just seen. And I think then, since we don't have much time, that would be the last thing we'll do, and then maybe we'll have.
If anybody has any questions, we're very open to questions.
Exactly. We could do a moment of Q&A. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. All right. So here it is again. I cleaned it up more or less from the traces, from the tape that we've seen, and the pieces of fabric, and the old photos and the newer photos that we've seen. And I wanted to share another way of looking. And the work we've seen before, just now, Born from Sin Cloud, is a work that tries to speak about memory and the erasure that exists within memory. And I tell the story of my experience of the White City. And in the end of the story of the film, other voices appear, and I'll also share that. But first of all, I want to get a little bit back to the animation. So what I usually do, I work, because of course, I assume you will all try it later on at home. So I work with a piece of glass, and the glass allows me to actually erase the different layers. And then I also work with glycerin and some ink that you were just about to see. And what I usually do is that I could work in different ways. So the ink creates traces. And with the ink, for example, I could leave the traces of my hand, or the traces of the city, as we've seen before. I could take off some parts of it, and maybe let the ink build a little piece from a city, as we've seen in the film right now. And of course, now I'm doing it live, so it would become a bit more abstract. But when I have the time with myself, since the glycerin keeps it very wet, as you could see, I could work slower. And then I create images, like, for example, the animator Caroline Leaf also works in a similar way. I learned many of the things I do with her from her films. And then, like that, I, for example, create a trace of my hand. And then in another frame, I could move my hand a bit higher and higher and higher. And when I'll combine all the images together, this movement will happen. So when I'll film all of these, I could see all of these traces or all of these marks happening without my hand appearing. And that's something that I love very much about working with ink, that there is always a trace of the hand. You could really feel the kind of shaky hand and how it creates, the traces it leaves, and yet it's absent. And it kind of, for like being, I think creating art could be actually sometimes quite lonely because you're doing all those things only with yourself. And for me, when I leave the marks of my hand, I get the chance to share some of the intimacy that I have while making animation with the people that see it afterwards. Sabrina, is there anything you want to add or ask or?
No, I found it super interesting, really, how each one of your techniques kind of how it addresses like these different ideas of memory and erasure and like this idea of traces. I find it really fascinating, really also in the context of history, and a very, very beautiful feature of your work, really, and to address this idea of history. So working with all these traces. How would you say, do you think that each movie is, you work with a different technique in order to address a different aspect of time, or how would you say?
I mean, it changes, and I think my fascination, as I've shown before, and actually as you could also see in Born from Sin Cloud, the movie that I just shared now, even though I use the ink, I also introduced the stone. And in the film that we've just seen, you could see the stones and how the stones are being marked, perhaps, as I've seen it, perhaps mapped, like kind of memories that are existing or that are present within the city. But then what happens in the film that we've just seen, just like what I'm doing now very quickly, so it's a bit less precise, but I combined my thoughts about the stone as a symbol of memory, but also as some kind of a very concrete object, together with my interest in things that are passing by, that are disappearing. And that happens when the traces of the stone, like you see now, when I use the water, are slowly washed away. So the different techniques tells different stories, and the combination of these different techniques allows different kind of ideas to perhaps coexist together in my works. So yeah, and
there is another question here from Nava, and she's curious about the fluid motion you get to like the ink dripping down the frame.
Could you say, or maybe I'll go back to the, get back to the show?
Okay. No, I would keep the frame. It's nice to see.
Oh, okay, but I'll just, okay. Nava is asking, I'm curious about the fluid motion you get to, like the ink dripping down the frame. So thank you, Nava, for your question. I'll go back to, let's get back to the light table. So as I said before, with stop motion, also the movement and how smooth the movement is related to the amount of frames that I would take. So for example, if I want to have the movement of the ink moving and growing right now in my film, I would just, as you could see actually over here, I would just take many shots, one after another. And that's how I would grasp this stain and the way it changes. So that's actually what I really love about stop motion as well, that in a way it's very magical. And when you see it, it feels like it is coming from another world, but yet it's also very simple. And in all my works, you could easily recognize the materials. They are always there. So the fluidity is as simple as it looks. It's just many frames of the fluid. And maybe one last thing that is interesting to say about it is that I think, like speaking about materiality, I think that there is always this kind of tension when I work. It's a bit like being a tour guide. You have all the different stories that you want to tell, but then there is also the reality and how the city wants to move you around. Like if you speak in a very loud junction, you can't tell the full story. So in my animation, I try in one way to control the story and to control, for example, the ink and try to create something that is recognizable, but also work with the water and the ink, etc., and let the material lead me and see what the material would do. And that's, yeah, these are two ways of working that I combine together.
So kind of two contradicting forces, so to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, super interesting. We have another question. Do you only work with stop motion, or are there other methods of animation you are exploring?
In animation, I actually work only with stop motion animation. I did learn some 3D animation, but I must say I went back to this old school way of working. There is something about touching. I guess that's maybe how I am. Like there is something about the ability to work in a digital medium, but with things that are that tactile and that familiar in a sensual way. That's apparently I realized when I learned the 3D animation, that's a principle that was hard for me to let go of. And I went back to the stop motion, but I never say never, because I would never think that I would be an artist that makes mainly video. So maybe this would also become part of my work. Yeah. If there are no more questions, maybe I can share last few seconds, or like when we close, maybe I can share.
I think my last question, maybe, I mean, I have a lot of questions, but we're running out of time, so I'll have to keep them for next time. But I think maybe as a concluding question, I would like to ask, you're born and raised Tel Avivian with 3 ancestors in Tel Aviv. I think I never met somebody with such a great history, a Tel Avivian history. As a Tel Avivian myself, proud Tel Avivian myself, I'm saying this. So I would like to know, now that you're not living in Tel Aviv for the past few years, what does Tel Aviv mean for you or represent for you when you're so far away from her in your work, in your life?
I think maybe okay. I'll leave the screen. I'll close it and I'll go back here. I think I told you that when we spoke about it before, but that there is this story, the invisible cities, where in the end it's like different kind of, maybe people know it, it's quite almost a cliche even, but I love this book and I go back to it often, because there are stories of different kind of cities, and each city has its quality and carries a different story, and it's so full of details. But in the end of the story, where the main character describes all these cities, the Caesar that this storyteller tells him all the stories, he asks him about Venice. And Marco Polo, the storyteller that have seen all those different cities, says that in every city that he arrives, he always arrives to Venice. So I think that in that way, I kind of experienced the idea of Tel Aviv. I mean, urban landscape and urban histories is something that fascinates me wherever I live. But my way of thinking about cities or moving around cities is always planned in Tel Aviv. And maybe it's a good moment also to thank you and thank Liebling House, and to say that it was a very special, this exhibition was very special to me because I had the chance to exhibit my works in the neighborhood where I grew up, and kind of connect again all those works that are also very much related to being away from home. I think it allowed me to think about my home or the idea of home in a different way. And this exhibition was a platform and an amazing chance for me to take those fragments, those thoughts, and put them back there. Okay, so.
We have one last question, and it kind of is linking to this from Talia, from our guest, and this will be the very last one, and we will be closing. Talia says, you beautifully tell such a powerful, layered, site-specific story, and I'm wondering how it translates in the international context in which you work, which part of it you kind of answered.
Wow, that's a very good question, Natalia. Maybe we should meet and speak about that. But I think that there is something very direct about showing these works in Tel Aviv and in its context, because people understand the different layers in a much more maybe familiar way. There is less mediation that needs to be done. Whether I feel that when it was presented in other places, the questions were different. I also think that it is related to how people view art. So some people really need the information, and some people could just live with the idea that it's a city. I showed it in one place, in one gallery in Amsterdam, and somebody came back to me and he said, is it about Cyprus? And this guy was from Cyprus. And I thought that was really beautiful, because he kind of recognized some traces or some stories within it, and immediately related to himself. So back to Talia's question, I think maybe I could make a whole presentation just about me comparing different languages and approaches to art in the different places where I work. But I think that there is something that at least I try with my work to speak, first of all, to the heart. And that's something that could kind of break through any cultural understandings. And then there is the informative part, where I think, when I exhibit such works, for example, here in New York or in Amsterdam, there needs to be a bit more clarification or precision about my attempt to speak about history and to give a bit more concrete context. I presume, but maybe I will give a different answer in a few months. So I'll get back to you with that. Constantly changing. Yeah.
So thank you. So now we'll have like a closing performance, animation performance.
Yeah, let's do that. And I'll put also in the chat, just if people are interested to see or hear more, I'm putting here the link to the Liebling House website, and also my own website and my contact. So if you're curious or you wish to see the full film, I'm happy to send you a private link.
Okay. Of course, come to the exhibition. That's the other option.
Come to the exhibition if you're in Tel Aviv, please.
End of April to the 30th of April.
Yeah, and have a coffee in the garden, in the beautiful garden of Liebling House for me as well. Okay, so let's do that. So I thought about ending with a small live performance, which is also something that I did in the last years, collaborating with musicians. And I'm just going to put some music of Florian, that is another musician I work with, but that's that's another story. And let's just experience a bit.
Danielle, we're not seeing anything, so I don't know.
Oh, that's good to know. I definitely started performing here with myself. Okay.
Yeah, we can't hear the sound and we can't see the.
Okay. Okay. Let's do. Okay. You can't hear the sound as well.
No.
Okay. How about now? Do you hear the sound?
Now we hear the sound and we see the screen.
Okay. Do you see the screen?
Yeah. So this is the.
So as you see, I already started.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah,
we'll have this for 2 minutes and we'll say goodbye to all of you. Thank you for being here.
Okay. So I just wanted to create something small to show a little bit the fluidity and how it works. And I kind of used it in the demonstration we did. I think that would be a good moment to close. And we could, if people are interested, after we'll thank everybody. I could just leave one film open as a shared screen and people could watch it and then leave. So we could finish like that. Okay, thank you all for listening. Yeah, and for joining us.
Thank you so much first of all, thank you so much, Danielle, for the fantastic glimpse into your studio, into the way you create and think and combine all these thoughts and emotions. And it's really, really fascinating how all these things, everything is another layer and makes this work so interesting and intricate and fascinating, really. Now seeing you do this little performance was really, it really captures, like the movement has its own life, and it's like, it's hypnotizing in a way. So it's like really has a lot of power. and which you can see in all your films and in the exhibition. So it's really, really, it was fantastic meeting. So thank you again. And thank you everyone for coming and being with us. And I'll say again, the exhibition is showing until the 30th of April. And I'll just say that the next open call for the project room and the question, what is the White City, will be opened up for you in about 2 weeks. So it will be wonderful for everyone who's interested to participate and to send us your work. And that's it. Hope to see you all soon, either in the Liebling House or somewhere.
Yeah. All right. So I think I can finish with the full version of
Eliyahu.
Eliyahu. Okay. Eliyahu for Sabrina's request. So I'll leave the full version, and thank you so much. If you'll visit the exhibition, you will see that there is a very long list of all the people that are part of this, of the making, and all the people that supported me along the making of this work. So yeah, it's always important for me to say that it takes a whole village to raise an animation film, as the good old saying. And now this, Eliyahu. Thank you all. Okay, Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you. Thank you.